طيب، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Good evening, everyone. Today, the Sudanese Doctor Association in Qatar, we are privileged to have Dr. Hamad Abdel Hadi as our speaker today. Dr. Hamad is a senior consultant of infectious diseases in Hamad Medical Corporation, and he's an associate professor in the Medical College at Qatar University. He's also a core faculty in the infectious disease fellowship in Hamad Medical Corporation, and with a vast experience in teaching and a clinical experience as well. Dr. Hamad has been a good asset to the Sudanese Doctor Association in Qatar, delivering many lectures related to the field of infectious diseases, and he's been also one of the members of the scientific planning committee of our symposium, the second and the third symposium. So we're really privileged to have Dr. Hamad with us today. He will be taking us about how to elevate our presentation skills, what the pitfalls and the things that people need to work on, and in order to get better presentations. So, Dr. Hamad, without further delay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Khalid, for the presentation, and thank you for the nice introduction. As already mentioned, I'm going to talk today about elevating presentation skills and how to improve that. Um, because this was part of the workshop, actually, we recently sort of introduced في SUDAC third academic scientific conference, and because the sort of audience was a lot were interested in the material, we thought to move it into an online presentation through Zoom. I have no conflict of interest related to this presentation. All presented material are derived from existing professional knowledge and experience, as well as I will give at the end some links for the where I got it from. Any presentation have a background. فأنا I will try, because this is mainly presented to scientific community, mainly Sudanese doctor, لأنه this medical presentation, لكن it can act to different people. أنا هتكلم بالعربي وبالإنجليزي عشان to provide the message. طبعا أي presentation بيكون عنده background. يعني أنا involved in medical education for almost 25 years وجاي من education family. My grandfather and father, both of them الله يرحمهم, they spent all their life teaching. يعني my father was 40 years teaching وأنا حسي 25% chose medical education for teaching, which is you passing the torch of knowledge and experience to future generation. To augment the experience بتاعتي أنا عملت ماستر في medical education from a Royal College of Surgeons of Ireland about 10 years ago. عشان كده أنت you drive experience. What I have noticed يعني since I came to Qatar, يعني في a lot of presentations either at the level of the department, at the level of the hospital, or at the level of the conferences. I noticed especially for junior doctors بيكون في pitfalls and weaknesses في presentation, and I thought to use my previous experience to pass it to the future generation. ودي حتة مهمة جدا لأنه presentation skills I will show you عبارة عن multiple skills. وفي الادلت medical education عموما والadult education انت you don't need to give the details, انت you just need to give to show the people the path and the way, وهم بعد ذاك they will open the gates. فعشان كده أنا I'm not going to spoon feed people. يعني أنا I'm just going to show you the guide of giving an effective presentation, and this is the whole theme of this to do so احنا we need to acknowledge the importance of presentation in medical professions education. I will try to give you provide practical tips for effective presentation skill or avoid common presentation mistakes. This is what most people they make mistakes and we try to avoid them. And the whole objective of this talk is to improve the delivery of presentation, and I will show you how to do so in a scientific manners. في الوركشوب we use group participation or sharing of practical skills because it's very much يعني this is one of the education theory انك انت you try to use the skills of others. when we deliver this workshop انا ذات استفدت in the workshop because I gained from other people experience because people will tell you something into you're not aware of and how to systematically approach your presentation. So in في presentation today I will give the lecture but we will open question at the end if needed يعني. طيب it's very important as you know presentation is very integral يعني I've been in the field of medicine for almost 30 years. Very integral component of medical profession education because the educator try to pass a message and they can pass this message through presentation or through education which could have a half an hour or 1 hour session. On this hour the presenter will gain all their experiences and to try to deliver it into for example a topic or a session for the audience. And it's very central for continuous medical education. As you know, for medical education, it's very important to have a presentation, and which we do it in all our department almost on weekly basis. And again, it is very essential for continuous professional development or the CBD. All of us, when we prepare for presentation, you have to go and search, you have to go and read, you have to look at the guidelines. And I'm sure any one of you had this experience when they do the presentation, they will gain extra knowledge after doing that. Then في evidence-based medicine or which is very principle في our profession. When you do a presentation, you have to go for the updated knowledge, what is most recent, what is guidelines are saying, and if there is anything new. So it's all about updates. Very frequently when we do a presentation, we open new gates and this has happened to us all in weekly basis. When somebody present, you will get an idea. We haven't thought about this before and what is the knowledge gap and what we can bridge this gap either by new ideas of research. And I will touch on that later. So one of the important things in the workshop, I ask people, for example, you've been asked to give a presentation in a month's time. What time is slot? In 1 hour. I ask them this question because it's very interesting. Even in the workshop, there was a big variation. So I ask people, when should you start preparations? And what do you need to know? And what should you anticipate? For example, if you're giving a presentation in a month's time, what other things you should anticipate? And how many slides you need to prepare? Okay, this is very key question for the presentation, very key. Yani you've been asked to give a presentation in a month. أنا from my experience and in this field for long years, I know people can do this in a day or two, okay? And the people might be organized and start immediately, okay? And some people might give it a week or two. My answer to this question, depending on the stake, okay? So if you're having a very important presentation, that is in presentation is very important to you and to others, you have to start very early. And that is very important. Even for, medium-sized presentation, starting early will never hurt you. So always, because if you start early, that is very important. It will give you time because a lot of the topics, when you start them, you don't know how the depths unless you start. Okay. So that is always the idea to start early. Late presentation, and because when I say people presenting, I can see the pitfall very easily. Spelling mistakes, slides are not prepared. People, and in the question it will appear as well when you ask the presenter, what about this and that, because they prepared your presentation very late. They didn't cover all topics, so they don't know the topic in depth. So it's very important to start early. What you need to know, we will cover that in details. I think the most important thing, what you need to know is the audience, the level of audience. And that is, this is number one. Because if you're giving the sort of presentation to doctors, different from nurses, healthcare professionals, university academics, so it is very important to know because you will gauge your presentation according to the audience. So if you give nurses, for example, a very complicated presentation, you're not going to deliver a very good. If you give it to a lay person, for example, and I myself, for example, in my field, I give a presentation for infectious diseases. It could be to the public, it could be to the sort of healthcare worker, it could be sort of, and it will go to universities or academic and scientists. So every time your level of preparation should be different. You should anticipate a lot of things. You have to, for example, you need to look at, where you're going to give your presentation, what modalities, Microsoft Team, face-to-face. This is all things you have to ask about it to anticipate. And in the audience also, when you do your research, it depends. For example, if you give a presentation at university, you have to anticipate there might be expert. And I put this question mainly anticipation of expert among the audience. So if you talk, rubbish, one of the expert in the audience might, put you in a very unease by asking you difficult question or detailed question you don't know. Okay. So it's very important. One of the anticipation, you have to see, what will be among the audience. How many slides will you prepare? You're giving a slide for example, a presentation for 1 hour. So if I will say, if you leave room for discussion for 10, 15 minutes, okay, so you will have 45 minutes. And it was very interesting actually on that workshop where people talked about how many slides. Some people say 30, some people say 60, okay? So just to show you how people are different in their perception of the same thing. It's a topic, it's a question, how many slides would you prefer? And I will going to show you later a rule of slides, how many to prepare. There is rule for that. And this mistake, and I will talk about it, is variable. And I see presentation frequently, and I can just very quickly tell by the quality of the presentation from the number of slides. I think to the right, you will see a picture of milestones, which we see it very frequently in medical education. And people might just not to relate that a milestone of a Roman origin. Romans, they brought these stones, and every 16 sort of steps, they put a stone. That's why a mile is a 1600 sort of foot. And the name of milestones or progress, depending, for example, if there is a road taking to Rome, they will tell you this milestone number 5 or 6, so you will know that you are 5 or 6 miles from Rome. So, and milestones, it's a progress. So it's very important to choose a relevant topic. It could be a case, it could be a piece of research, it could be quality. And it's very important to know your ground, as I mentioned, which is you have to spectrum of the audience, who is going to be there. And because this is very key, even the tone and the level of the presentation will be measured by the audience ground. An approach is very important, and how to approach a topic. For example, if you are going to do something about a medical topic, I see very frequently, this is one of the big mistakes actually on approach, especially if you're giving a topic to experts or people interested, for example, in your departments. If you are descriptive, for example, if you say what causes this, and you just tell them the epidemiology, the pathology, the clinical picture, and the management, this is it's not interesting at all, because then I can open Google or AI to get this information, and I want you to approach this topic from a different perspective. So this is very important. So you have to be comparative and critical, and this is rather than descriptive, because descriptive people retain 10% of what you present to them in a descriptive manner. So that is not good. So if you're presenting a topic, you have to be comparative and critical. What other? Some people showed this, the other people showed that. But there is evidence of something else. And this study is weak because of X, Y, and Z. So to be comparative and critical will let people think, and this is all critical thinking is very integral in presentation and research. Also very important is to set objectives. Okay. I put it like a story. Any presentation is a story. So start with from the beginning and end, number 2, 3, 4, 5. So, and I will do that with a slide sorter actually, because your presentation should look like a story. And I'm going, for example, from the simple to complex. from the epidemiology to end of prevention, for example. So it has to have these steps, and steps has to be logical. You cannot bring something in prevention before the epidemiology, for example. So it has to be, and it's very important to stick to the objective. And these things, I see it very frequently. Just recently, I've been to a meeting. The title of the talk was something, and the slide was completely different. Okay, because the presenter maybe he has a bank of slides and things. He put the title, and then he talked to the audience about something else. And you see it very frequently, by the way. This even with amongst experienced presenters. That's why when you set the objective at the beginning, as I put in my first slide, what I want you to do, and every slide you put, it has to align to your objective and your title, and that is very important. And I'm sure a lot of you, anybody who went to conferences, sometimes you like the title of a presentation, you go to the meeting, you spend half an hour or 1 hour in the meeting, and then you get very disappointed because the title misled you or was enticing, but the content was different. Okay, this is what you didn't sort of list yourself for that. So that's why, to avoid this, your title, your objective always should align with the content. Okay. Um, for example, if you give a presentation in a department or anywhere, you have to communicate with colleagues, because communication, this is a project. Is this topic has been sort of presented before, and who presented in which way? Okay, so you can present the same topic, but in a different way. So that's why when we communicate with colleagues regarding previous experience, that is very important to know what is going on. And then planning and research is very important, because believe me, the more, even for this presentation, and I started early, you do a lot of work, because you will get more ideas as the times goes on. So the research will never hurt. And I will say the key success for any presentation is planning. Okay, you have to define and align the presentation to objective. I already mentioned that. And you have to tailor your presentation to the audience expectation and perception. Always ask yourself when you present, what does the audience want from my presentation? For example, and I asked the audience actually in the workshop, what do you expect me to deliver to you? Most people will say we want to gain new skill to improve our presentation skill. So knowing what is the audience signed for, and I'm sure a lot of you who came today for the presentation, they looking for this, what they will gain from this presentation, so they can deliver a better presentation. So that objective, whenever you put any slide, you have to put in mind what is the audience want from me and how I can fulfill that expectation. So that will show very, very sort of helpful to deliver a good presentation. Then organize content logically. I already mentioned that, to starting from the simple to complex in a logical manner. So you cannot start with a very complex slide and then you put the symbol later on. So you have to build, and it is a climax. For example, if you giving case study, we all do that. The most interesting case and the most complex case, you leave it to the end. Because if you give a very complex case at the beginning, you just waste your sort of time. You give the patient a simple story at the beginning, an intermediate, and then a complex case, very tough, which you show, for example, challenges. Okay, so and this is very well sort of most experienced presenter do that. So as I mentioned, you have to research, and you have to best available evidence. And I will show you, what I mean by best available evidence, because I notice very frequently, for example, in our juniors, when they present evidence, for example, they give this case report showed that, this case showed report that, but the case report are at the bottom of the evidence-based medicine. And as people know that in the top of evidence-based medicine, you have randomized controlled trial, you have systematic review and meta-analysis as a top. So when you say something, it have to align. For example, you can give me 100 case report and it might not mean a lot. But if you give me a randomized controlled trials or systematic review or meta-analysis, if you're telling me treatment for this condition or X or Y based on a randomized controlled trial or a meta-analysis, it will be much better of telling me in a case report, people treated this patient with this. So weighing of evidence is very important. We all start our search by Google. Google, as everybody know, Google is the father of 1990s, the father of artificial intelligence, because the algorithm of artificial intelligence started in Google, by the way, and all the searches in Google start by in AI. So even the ranking and everything in Google, depending on the search, this is all AI. And now AI came to the forefront, and it made a revolution as everybody expecting. Yani. And AI, we use the internet. You put the name of the topic you want to present, you will get a lot of information. In the past, يعني احنا we used to get our medical presentation from Medline and PubMed. Unfortunately, now Medline and PubMed, you use them for the evidence backing, لكن for the organization of your presentation, they became inferior because their strengths of IT is not as good as AI. فال AI will bring information. The only weakness of AI, as all of you might witness, in a sources of AI, it needs meticulous eye because it might give you a low evidence. It could be a web page or something. So what you yourself, you have to use your critical thinking of from AI, what to choose and what not to choose. Okay. Very frequently, sometimes if you have a complex topic, I'll put it in Google, but I say PPT, for example, PowerPoint presentation. So you restrict the search for PowerPoint presentation, and it will only give you previous presentation and PowerPoint. The value of it, and I don't like using other people's slides, but you can use the ideas, because if you give a topic, and you will see how other people approach it, and that is very interesting. For example, even for effective practical presentation, if you put it in Google and you put BBT, and then you will see how other people approach the subject, what other area they cover, because and I'm covering a lot of things, but I might omit something. And I will show you one of the slides which I use AI actually, because I didn't consider it, okay? Because all of us, we have cognitive sort of function, but we have our bits false as well. So what other things you haven't thought of which need to be covered, which could be important to some audience, but it's not important to you in your way of thinking or your approach. So using sort of PowerPoint decks to see what other people did in the previous experience is very important. And my advice, I know people now rely on AI sort of endlessly. You have to use it wisely. AI has very many strengths, but it have limitation as well, because in some my experience with AI, it can be very generic. It will not be specific. So if you want to approach a subject from a very expert way, AI might not give you the right sort of measurement or gauge or gauging. So it's very important to use AI wisely, and it's a great tool. Definitely save a lot of time for all of us, but you have to know how to approach that subject wisely. And the principles, as I already mentioned, it is the detailed planning and preparation, understanding the audience background and anticipation. That is very important. And you have to align your objectives with from the title to summary, everything to have to align to the title. And you have to have this, what we call it, the perfect mix of data and narrative. Okay. And I will show that in the next slide. Because all the presentation is, I'm talking now. So, but also I have data to show you either in terms of the slides, or it could be graphs or something. You have to have this mix as the presenter of what you want to present as a narrative and what is backed by this data. Some, very frequently, for example, if you look like TED presentation, TED could be only talking. So you can see the presenter just convince you by talking. Okay. So the narrative is very important, but others will rely on the data more than the talking. But you have to have the right things between the mix of data and narrative. And then, there is auditory important, but also there is physical presence, especially if you are presenting in front of people in a conference, or you will see people, for example, to like to walk. Sometimes they will use their voice So a physical presence is very important, but also and I'm sure many of you before were in presentation where you can hardly hear the presenter. Okay, the presenter voice is very distant. You cannot hear them very well. So that will impact definitely on the quality of the presentation, or the tone of their talking is very monotonous. They will talk, very slowly, and this is again you have to use your tones. For example, I gave the example of the TED speak, presentation. TED is the top of using voice sort of tones to try to convince the audience. Okay, it's just by using the right tones, when to raise your voice, when to lower it, where to be sort of sympathetic. This is very important. And very important in presentation is to avoid the cognitive overload, and which is happened frequently actually. By cognitive overload, I mean by giving too much information. And that is will go always with prolonged slides. If your slides, all of us, we have attention span. An attention span, you will lose it at one point. Okay, so if you give too much presentation, too much data, people will switch off. So you have to have the sensitivity, even if you want to skip your slide, if you feel people are tired, by skipping that. But the right balance is very important. So you have to have the right balance of the content, not to overload people, because if you give me list graphs after graphs, and then I will switch. Most audience will switch off eventually. So you have to avoid that, and to do so, you have to balance the content with time. And this is a sort of representation, as you can see it, summarize everything. So in your presentation, you have a message. For example, in my presentation today, how people have to improve their effective presentation skill. That is my message. I have to have a delivery method. How come I deliver this? It could be either by slide, physical presence, explanation, and I have to use the visuals. The intersection, of these three will pass your message, very well. And your message has to be very simple, very clear, very original, and it has to be related to the audience. I'm sure a lot of you, and I've seen somebody giving a very specific presentation to general audience. They were not going to be interested because it's not related to them. Okay. So if you see it also in conferences where people come for the CPDs rather than the content, that the audience might not be interested because the subject is very deep and it's not related. So even if you're going to a conference or you're going to a meeting, you need to know what is the relationship of your topic to the audience. You might make it very specific or you might make it generic. Okay. And then it's very important in the presentation is to make it enjoyable. Okay, if you have a very boring presentation, people will not like it. So you have to find a way how to make, it could be by pictures, it could be by the way you talk. So you have to, some people very frequently, they crack jokes to keep people sort of interested. And it's important to make the presentation exciting. I know a lot of people might not like sort of using, exciting presentation. They have to try to go to the, what we call it, the old school, to make the presentation just the old way. But you have to be very convincing, actually, to try to make the people, follow you and enjoy what you're presenting if you are not using it. So you can use shapes like arrows, circles, and you can use charts and you can use photos. And I will show in the next slide how you can do that. You can use sort of insert objects. You can use a slide transition and animation to do so. And you can add on using AI tools. If you put a sort of presentation in any AI, it will give you a presentation, but sometimes you might need to use ideas and modify it. And then, as I mentioned, use these things in moderation, because if you put too much photos, too much, for example, even in the slide transition I used today, there is some of them are too much. So you don't need to use those. Okay. So when you look at the audience spectrum, as you can see, the minions to the right are the audience. The minions came in 2012, actually, when I did some search from the Despicable Me film, and became sort of very famous audience. Some of the audience are factual. people, they like text. You have to, written things. They like tables because they like the facts. Some are conceptuals, and I also teach in leadership, and I know the difference between people sort of factual and conceptuals. They like shapes and diagrams. So if you, for example, I showed you the message, the delivery, and the visual, that is a diagram. So I can pass my message through shapes and diagrams, okay? And this is a conceptual type of, audience or individual. Some are visuals. I myself, I'm a visual person. I like to pictures and colors. Okay. Some people don't like pictures, so they will be more into sort of factuals like with text. Okay. Some are auditory. People they like to listen. Some people will sit there, they just listen to the presenters. Okay. Some are social. We are all human beings. So some of the people in the audience, they might like interaction. So you have to ask them questions. And you might ask, what is your feedback? Voting. This is all social interaction. So how can to fulfill all this sort of audience, And from my experience, this is one of the weaknesses. You will see some of the presentation all factual, all text. You will see from the beginning to the end. There is no one picture, okay? And some are, you will see some of the presentation, even from experienced presenter, all of them like sort of shapes and diagrams or so you have to mix that. So the bottom line, you have to be all rounder. An all rounder in sport is, the individual who are doing all things well. Okay, so it has to you have to be good across all, and you have to use them in moderation. So if you put a picture, you can make things softer, easily. You can convey the message. For example, in this picture, I want to talk about the audience are different. As you can see, some of them with one eye, some two eyes, some without glasses. So the audience will be different. So this is what exactly I meant. People, the audience spectrum can be different, but you have to address the anticipation of each one of them by making a balance between all of them. And in Google, and I myself, I know other people might use different things. I use keywords. For example, if I'm teaching in leadership, I will put leadership, and then you have to look at the pictures which is generated from, experience. You can put a word like experience, and then you will generate a picture which will capture what you are intending to say. And I think to all of you might know that a picture or a concept can very well be explained by a picture. I just want to see what is my timing because it's very important to notice your timing. And to make it exciting, this is sort of PowerPoint. I know other people will use different things, and during my search, I think still 90% of people in medical education use PowerPoint. There are other modalities, I will come to it, but and I think because PowerPoint serve our objective of being very simple and straightforward. So in the PowerPoint platform, as you can see here on the top, you got file, home, insert, draw. This insert, you can insert shapes, arrows, you can change them with different colors. This arrow, for example, by insert, I use an arrow and I colors it. And then you can use other sort of things like animation. Animation, it will tell you how the arrow, for example, can show like come from the right, from the left, from the top. And this is very useful when you use, for example, graphs and tables. So if you're showing a people study and you want to show this is the highest and this is the lowest, and you want to circle something important, this is insert and animation is very useful because sometimes you might put a slide for example, graph, and you talk, and then you see the research found X or Y. Then when you say X or Y, you have to press on your interactive button to show you an arrow will show. And the last thing, for example, if you can see between my slide, I use slide transition moving from one to you might not use it. It's not necessarily, but you need to be aware of it, how to move from one slide to other. And, if like 80% or 90% of people present their presentation on the same manner, it has to have the content has to be very good for people to follow them. So that's why I say the exciting tools use it in moderation and to make use of it. And sometimes it convey the message if you want to make people. And for example, if you go to Facebook or if you go to Google, because this is we are adult, for example, when I start searching this in Facebook, I have a plethora of any apps asking me to use their tools for presentation, and there is so many of them, and I will show you. For example, one of them is called infographics. This is where the sort of tools which you can use it, and it can show you how to use very beautiful slides. Whenever you see a good presentation, and people just invested 1 hour, for example, the following few slides through this sort of three techniques. If you want to add in, this is new, by the way, in PowerPoint. PowerPoint, everybody is using AI now. So PowerPoint introduce adds in, and this is an AI. So it will ask you, for example, what presentation you want to present. You can put the title and it will generate slide. And as I mentioned, I don't trust AI to do all your presentation. You need it to guide you of what you should think of. So in the workshop, we asked sort of groups to look at what is the presentation blessing and pitfalls, do and don't. And this is where, as I be sharing of experience, people will tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't to do in presentation. I summarized this in the sort of on this, what you should do. You have to prepare early. I already mentioned that that's very important. And late preparation will always jeopardize your delivery. If you start, 48 hours or, 2 or 3 days before your presentation, your delivery will be jeopardized. And I can guarantee that. And title has to be clear and catching. Even, for example, you can see here, Sudak, for example, and I put presentation still. They use elevating presentation skills. So you should make the title catchy. If you use a very simple simple presentation, people even might be put off. But if you use, for example, a case of quote masquerading as something like this, if you use a catching word, people will be interested to see what is inside. So you have your title has to be catchy. And very common mistakes, as I already mentioned, when the title and the content are not related. Okay, and this is very sort of common mistakes. Avoid it. Actually, the title, the objective, the content should align. Okay, you try to use sound language format throughout, written and spoken, online resources for checking. For example, sometimes when you go to presentation, you will see some people might make spelling mistake in a common words. Okay. I know English language is not our first language, but you need to use planning and research to avoid that. For example, if you put all your presentation on Google or AI and ask them to give you an audio, all your presentation will be run in an audio, okay? And you can hear the words, and then you can avoid to make a mistake through that way. And if there is a difficult, for example, where like a name of a scientist or a name of a syndrome, you can't pronounce it well, you can just put it into Google and ask it to pronounce it, and then it will make it. For example, very common, you'll see some people will pronounce a name of a syndrome in the wrong way or a name of a scientist in the wrong way because they haven't prepared well. So an important area is about how many lines you put. The general advice is to use 6 to 8 bullets per slides and avoid overcrowding. Overcrowding happen very frequent. I just a few days ago, I saw a presentation, people writing, overcrowded sort of, because, or using italics, bold text, and underline, which is underline is very common in the region. Actually, when I came to the Gulf, I see a lot of people, write the full page and put underlining. Try to avoid it unless it is necessary, unless it serves a purpose, but you cannot use it all in all your slides, okay? And again, content mix, factual as visual, as I mentioned, and try to avoid use emoji and a special character, because of Generation Z. Some of the audience might be old, sort of folks like me. I went to a conference in British Infectious Association, one of the young generation. All her presentation was emojis, you see, even in the case history, the presentation, was a case study. You cannot do that with the old generation. Among the audience, I will be offended by that. This is a very high caliber international conference. You cannot use, something which is might, maybe more than half of the audience might not approve that. Okay. And stick to time frames, and I show this even in our SUDAC. Khalid was with us, which was a very high caliber conference delivered. We were privileged to be in this organizing committee. One of the presenter has fantastic slides, excellent slide. The time allocated was half an hour. When I counted his slides, he 72 slides. 72 slides. How come you can do that, to deliver that in half an hour? You have to have a miracle to deliver this slide. It's because although somebody very experienced, a very high caliber presenter, he made a common mistake because his ambition and objective is more than what he thinks, because he didn't stick to these rules. Try, especially in international conferences or local conference, to go beyond allocated time. And we've seen it very frequently. Actually, you see a presenter allocated 20 or 25 minutes and they go into 40 minutes. People flag to them, they don't bother because they spend a lot of time preparing these slides and the audience has to bear the consequences. And it's very uncivilized behavior to do so. Okay. In the question and time, you have to be very professional. You have to be very honest. You have to be very polite. And when responding to the question, and you have to listen attentively and carefully to the question. What is the question? And you have to answer the key message. Somebody, in your experience, did you research X or Y? Don't start by talking about something else. In the first instance, in my research, I found X and Y, and then you can elaborate afterwards. Don't be defensive, because you are here to give a scientific sort of opinion. Okay. If you say defensive, I didn't do that, it was done by somebody else, never be dishonest, okay, or hostile. We've seen some presenters are very hostile to try to be offensive to the one asking the question. It will not go well, actually, even if you deliver a sort of a very good presentation. If you are, sort of uncivilized and hostile to the one asked the question, because that person asked the question is true. Sometimes some people will ask silly questions. Even if they ask serious question, you have to be polite to them, because that you will score well, rather than we score sort of, if you were hostile to this individual. So the time rules, okay, and this is what I alluded to when I talked about stick to the time. I'm a fast presenter. I can do one slide per minute, okay? Some people are slow, so they have to give 1.5 per minute. For example, what I mean by that, if you have 45 minutes slot, you might do sort of 40 slides, okay? If you are fast, because some of them might be big shares, or it could be you talk to them less than a minute. But if you are slow, some people are slow, they would like to put the slide and talk much, okay? So your rule should be 1.5. So if you're doing a 45 minutes presentation, your slide should never exceed 30, okay? And if you are in a conference, for example, you have a 30 minutes, your slide has to be between 20 to 30, never more, okay? If you go beyond that, you will overrun time, okay? Because you have to put the slide, you have to talk about it. So this is the rules, actually. And very important to do the rehearsal, okay? The rehearsal, especially for important meeting, a few years ago, one of our sort of junior, sort of colleague, he was going for an oral presentation. And I asked him, did you do presentation before study? He said, no. So we took him at least for 4 or 5 times rehearsal, because the time slot, for example, 15 minutes. You have to prepare to slide, you have to know it, you have to go through the rehearsal. And the rehearsal will help you. Even myself, years ago, when I had oral presentation in a conference, I have to rehearse, actually, and even because I was junior by then, I was ambitious. I finished with time. I didn't leave time for question and answer. And some of these, moderator are very strict. If you take the 10 minutes, it is your fault. Nobody will ask you question. Even whatever your presentation was very exciting, or your content was very exciting. So you have to stick to the timing. And rehearsal will make you avoid this, okay? In the rehearsal, you can do it in front of your computer, okay? you will know your slides. You will know the sequence of the event, how you're going to say it. You can anticipate problems, is by even technical problems, and you will be familiar with time. So the rehearsal have a very variable, and I can recommend it, especially in big meetings, because all your rehearsal, you will know your content very well, and you will not overrun on times. And then you have to anticipate the question on time. For example, in the question which I gave earlier, you have 1 hour slot. You have to finish by 40 or 45 minutes to allow 15 minutes for the discussion, because this is how you will generate into you are here not to give people sort of patronizing sort of you need their engagement, you need your discussion, because the discussion must sometime will be the most important part of the presentation, is a discussion. So you have to give it enough time, and you have to build. The picture to the right, as you can see, this is a melting sort of watch, a very famous theme actually for Salvador Dali. And his surrealism sort of, or رائد من رواد السريالية. And I was searching why he was using sort of, and this is part of the narrative and the story. And I think they research saying that he was influenced by Albert Einstein, the relativity theory, and that time is very fluid and relative to many things. And time is very precious. One of my colleagues actually says that time is the most precious commodity on earth, because when it passes, you'll not get it back. So you have to make sure how to use your time, including all, even for useful things, and to spend it with the one sort of you adore or love. Um, I'm interested in art, some aspect, and again, I noticed, very frequently Salvador Dali put some insects. As you can see, there is a fly and there is a moth, and most of these artists, when they put these things, it has to mean something to them. And apparently, the moth look at the metamorphosis or the changing of things with time, and you can search as the work, for you what is the fly means in Salvador Dali. You can see whatever he puts in his ideas. He might be crazy, but these people put eternal sort of things for the future. In the technique of delivery, you have to use verbal and non-verbal. And by the verbals, your voice should be very clear. It shouldn't be monotonous, or shouldn't be fast. And make sure you correct pronunciation. Already I mentioned that. And if you are in doubt, feed it to Google or AI. And you have to use voice modulation, when to raise your voice, when to lower it. Because if you are talking very slow in a very one sort of tone, that is monotonous speech, people will sleep in the middle of the presentation. You have to maintain eye contact, covering all sections. So if you are, especially now we're doing, sort of Microsoft Team meeting or Zoom meetings, but if you are doing a live presentation, you have to look to the left, to the center, to the right. You have to go through, and that will make the audience focus with you. So that's very important. You have to use a body language, which could be your arms, or it could be sort of gesture, it could be face sort of gestures. The body language, some people do it excessively. I remember one of our juniors used to go, you will see some of the presenters, you will be all across the, again, that is too much, is not good. If you move too fast or you move around, people will not be free focused. You have to use it in moderation. And you have to engage with the audience. For example, if you allow question, you look to the left. Some people only look to the right. They don't look in the middle or to the left. And people in the middle or the left will get offended. So you have to always to look. And if you are giving a workshop, you have to to look in the rooms left, right, and center, because if somebody wants to ask a question, you have to grasp that. I'm going to give you just few minutes for people who are following, or it could be online, to look into this slide. I will try to narrate it because it is very important to make your presentation flow well, being clear and focused to avoid confusion. Very crowded slides make it difficult to read and flow, especially consuming visual and mental concentration, dumb auditory perception. Moreover, it will attract the presenter to read the content and be monotonous. while without being interactive. Okay, those with low concentration will not be able to benefit from the content and may be put off by the low quality of presentation. I hope this elaboration give you a good example to convince you to convey the intended message. What I'm trying to tell you from this slide, if you put a very overcrowded slides, the presenter, because they don't remember everything on the slides, they will try just to read it, and reading it is never good. Your ideas, it can be in bullets. You have to have a very focused, clear, and concise presentation. Has to be very tidy. Avoid overcrowding of content. As I mentioned, maximum of 68 bullets per. It's 3 lines. If you go beyond 3 lines, that is too much. It has to flow well, avoid monotonous speech, filling the gaps. You are the expert. You spend, hours and hours preparing the presentation. You know it more than anybody else in the audience, actually. So you just need a reminder. You need something you put the pathology, because you read the pathology and you read the epidemiology. You just need a reminder. In the line, you put the reminder, what you need to cover and what you didn't need to cover. And it has to be lively, encourage connections, especially on live presentation. So what I'm trying to tell you, that is, you have to put a thread for your presentation. This line, for example, I put focused. I want you, and then I can talk to you what I mean by focused. Okay. Before you start, your presentation, you have to arrive early. You've seen a lot of presenter actually can present late to the presentation, especially if you don't location. Upload your presentation and make it ready. A lot of our juniors, they try to open it from their email, from their WhatsApp. Things goes wrong. This is all you have to be prepared for that. And you have to anticipate technological glitches, particularly if you are using online surveys or audiovisual. And I try to avoid online surveys and audiovisual when possible, because anything can goes wrong. Actually, you can spend so much time, but when it come to the time, it doesn't it doesn't work well. And again, it will go into delay your time by 5 minutes or 3 minutes, and you ask somebody to do the technical stuff. So, for example, in cardiology, if you're putting an echocardiogram, that's important because the audience might expect to see what is the echo shot. But you need to know how to load it well into your content. And again, that will be on insert. On insert, you can use audio, you can use visual, and you can use video. And then ask for help from experts. Some of us, some of your colleagues might be very good, and they can help you to sort this. So this is all preparation is good planning. And on the day, you have to dress appropriately, especially if you're giving a live presentation. You have to be confident, nice, and smiling. Face the audience. Very frequently, you will see people put their slides and turn to the screen and give the audience their back. Okay, that's why computer in front of them. In the international conferences, you might see screen, underneath the podium, so people can follow it. And even though I think the maximum you have to look at your computer, because if you turn your back to the audience, this is not professional at all. It will not give sort of good points. And your voice has to be very audible and has to be very clear, so people can follow you. And to keep track of your time. People use their mobile in international conferences or local conferences. People can put a timer. Even in SUDAC, actually, we use a timer, but very frequently some of the speakers, even when before the timing, even with all the hints, 5 minutes and time is up, still people will go beyond that. And at the end, of your presentation, because people followed you for 30 slides, 40 slides, what I'm going to get out of this? So you have to have a summary and you have to have a take-home messages. This is a key thing, what you want people to remember. And you need to emphasize the important messages. For example, you can see from presentation, I'm going to tell you, stick with the time, okay? And then you have to use your references and links and email if needed. At the end of your presentation, you have to put a smile, even if the object or the topic was very sort of difficult. And because this audience came to listen to you, so you have to thank them and you have to be sort of nice and leave the room for question and answers. And as I mentioned, you have to build that at the end. And to deal with question, you must anticipate the question. We already mentioned that. you have to listen attentively. So each question have keywords. You have to see what is the keyword from that question. Somebody will ask you about the incidence of this. So this is, you have to cover this. How can we diagnose? So that the answer should focus in diagnosis. And you have to be open and honest. You can be diplomatic. You can leave, as I call it, escape room, an escape gate. An escape gate. We can say, I will look into my data and get back to you. I will talk to you after this meeting. I have this data, but I haven't examined it yet. So this is your escape gate, and you can talk to because the question sometimes you don't need to go into details. Defensive approach is counterproductive. So you must practice for big occasion. You have to be familiar with the topic. Anticipate areas of improvement, and you have to use time management because of the practice. AI brought this slide to me. In my initial presentation, I didn't consider slides. What we call it, people call it stage anxiety. Okay, some of the people feel very anxious actually because we are human beings. We're very, very big. Some of us are confident, some of us are anxious. So you have to uh, need how to deal with the stage anxiety. Good preparation, practice. Sometimes you need to focus at somebody you can trust in the audience so you can look into them. And you have to distract yourself sometime from, because as you can see, most of the anxious presenters, they start sort of anxious, then in the middle they get better, and then they will finish confident. So it's all a matter of timing, and focusing is very important. So one of our psychiatrist colleagues, talked about, special links if you have a stage anxiety and how can you address that. We can share that if needed. A slow approach is much better than fast. And anxiety gets worse by going fast. Okay. So you have to be slow, because by slow, you will remember the ideas and the content. If you go fast, then you will make mistakes. Okay. And then, I've been doing this since medical school, actually. If others can pass through this, I can. Okay. And, I remember with my colleagues, we have a very difficult year in medical school, and he was pointing me, if that person was able to pass this intermediate year, we can. So if others are able to do this, we can do these things. An important slide in presentation actually is to improve yourself. You are all human beings, continuous professional development. You cannot give presentation 10 years ago the same you do it now. So where is the CBD? Where is the progress? Where the beginner practitioner, which was a resident, an intermediate practitioner is a fellow, and then the advanced practitioner, when is a consultant or senior consultant. So, it is, heartbreaking when I see somebody actually is still in the beginner mode when they are a consultant, okay, or a senior consultant. That is, this is not a normal progress. Okay, either in the content, the mode of delivery, or the way of doing it. You have to elevate that. Why we say elevate your presentation, either in the way of tackle the topics with a comparative and critical, okay, or the slide, how you deliver the message. But you cannot deliver the same way of presentation, from the beginner if you are an advanced practitioner. So I'm promoting you actually to advance. And this is continuous professional development by using the tools, even this presentation, how to elevate your presentation from a beginner to intermediate and to advanced. And sometimes, even if you go to conferences, you see even among the advanced practitioners, there is a spectrum. Some of them are, beyond sort of comparison, and some of them are average. So this is the national, and this is the human beings, like the sort of butterflies. It can go from different stages. And in medical education, I remember when we done our master, they encourage us to use a feedback as a new theory actually of medical education. I never liked feedback because feedback is embarrassing. For example, to ask people, how did I do? What is the areas of improvement and things? But in all theories of medical education, feedback is very good, even for trainees, because if you present something, you can ask somebody you trust, how much my presentation, how can I improve? Some people do it by surveys, and that's why you can see it in the international conferences. They will not give you your certificate unless you do the feedback, because they use this feedback to see whether to invite this speaker in the future or not. Some of them were very good. Then this, they will come back to the future conferences, and some of them were average to poor with very bad sort of feedback. Then they will avoid asking them to come in the future. And the feedback, we use it to improve our pitfalls. What did I do wrong? And by asking your colleagues, for example, how was my presentation, and was there is any areas for improvement. And in medical education, feedback is a great sort of tool to improve performance. And there is a lot of, and I covered, for example, PowerPoint presentation. Google have slides. Some people, maybe 20% share using it. Bretzi also 10-15%. I will show you Bretzi. And the young Generation Z, especially very people who are doing sort of marketing and things, they use Canva. And Canva is a software, I think, developed by Australian groups. And this is mainly using picture modes to do presentation. Because we use PowerPoint, because PowerPoint will give you the fluctuation of text and things. And you can have AI powered, that like the Copilot from Microsoft, from ChatGPT or DeepSeek and others. I'm just going to show you. I went to about 7 years ago to a presentation, actually, to medical education conference, and people from Netherlands, they're using Bretzi, okay? And Bretzi is a software, I think developed by a Hungarian group. And it is using AI actually at the very initial sort of AI concept. And it's a software using things very similar to PowerPoint. I will put, for example, I put on Bretzi, make a presentation, mastering presentation skill. I am going to put it from presentation mode for people can see. It has a you can use it and in a specific sort of topics. What I like about it, that is you can create a story going from one area to another, from big to and you can use this, the story in a different way. And for example, here, like encourage audience participation. You can use picture. As you can see, Brezi uses my concept. What I said, it's a text between the text and the pictures very well. And it goes from stages. You can go from one areas to another, and it can be very exciting. It's not everybody sort of cup of tea. If you develop it yourself, it will take a lot of time. Okay, I remember I used it before. You have to put one slide after another and after another. It will take, but it's exciting about it. People will get sort of very excited by the way you present, especially if you are, for example, you are putting a new concept. You want to present to your team a new concept of doing things. So this is might be sort of I will get out of this, and I will try to go back to my presentation. This is a technical glitch I have to prepare. When I did this in the workshop, because I know sort of our hospital will not allow you to use the internet for this access. So I prepared myself by using my mobile hotspot to my computer to show people. This is how you can anticipate technical glitches. So you have to prepare, because I tested from my office, and I noticed I'm not being allowed. I'm not going to be connected when I do the presentation. So you have to prepare another thing. I think we're coming to the end of the presentation. That presentation are an integral tool for continuous medical education. This is a key point. Ability to deliver effective presentation is fundamental skill for sort of medical professional, all medical professionals, and to enable sharing of experience and knowledge, as I'm doing today. Planning presentation for, from objective to summary should undergo extensive research and preparation, adopting best available evidence. And tailoring presentation to the audience background using different delivery methods is the key to success. Different delivery methods. Delivering the presentation on the outlined form frame is an expected civilized requirement, including anticipation questionnaire. So I think my answer is, people have to stick to the time to avoid overrunning. I think by that, that was my last slide. And if any one of the audience want to make a comment, I'm quite happy to take that on board. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamad, for such a comprehensive presentation. I think it's an eye opener and very inspiring towards reaching a better presentation. So, if any of the audience has any question or any comment, please go ahead. We have a comment from Mazar. Her question is how to keep the audience engaged in an online presentation. Are the tips you have shared transferable to online presentations?
It's a good question. Actually, COVID brought the online presentation, and it brought medical education to a different things. So it has a pros and cons, the strengths and the weakness. So the online presentation, people can enjoy from different, for example, even in HMC here, we have different locations. People might not travel for, an hour to come and, but they can do it online. So it makes, the distance is shorter. So more people, and people might be less shy to ask question on online compared to the physical. How to keep them engaging, which is the key question from your question, is very difficult, okay? Because you don't have the physical presence. We see it sometimes, people might open the online and they might not be there, okay? But, for example, in our case conferences, people might ask in the middle, what is the working diagnosis? How can I improve? So by putting interjection question in the middle, or participation, or this is a problem, what do you think? You encourage people to discuss things. You have to be careful, because so if you engage the participant to ask to engage, then it might take 5-10 minutes of your time. So you have to be very careful. I think you have to make a balance between what you're going to say, okay? You can put questions, you can encourage people to comment. This is the only way to put them engaging, okay? If you have a longer presentation, like 45 minutes, I usually stop in the middle, okay? And make my presentation in two parts. For example, one, I just gave a presentation last Thursday. So I stop in the middle by giving, for example, the solid, and then the cases and I will ask them, do you have any question before I go? But generally, problem with online engagement is a big problem. Any further questions?
Any more questions? Yeah, Dr. Amani. Dr. Amani is our president of the Sudanese Doctor Association in Qatar. Yeah, Dr. Amani, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for very fundamental presentation and very interesting, Dr. Hamad. And thank you, Dr. Khalid, for all your efforts in the academic office. This is, I think, it's an essential part. And I remember yesterday I had a presentation and I was preparing with Breezy, and I stuck with the same problem that you mentioned, Dr. Hamad. Now I remember that's how I suffered, and the only thing that saved my neck actually is to have a plan B PowerPoint backup presentation. So when I couldn't, the prezi didn't work, I had my PowerPoint presentation ready. So I shifted to that. The thing that I wanted to add is the use of the other features in the presentation. I think we need another presentation or another session from you, Dr. Hamad, for the preparation of the slides itself, because adding some figures and preparation of the master slide, I think there is many techniques in preparing the slides that we can elaborate more and make the presentation enjoyable and interesting, engaging, and giving the good picture of the presenter. And it helps in transferring and the message itself. The ice breaking is one of the things that might engage the people during the presentation, especially online. Putting some slides that is outside the topic in the middle might at least make some engagement and ice breaking. That is a few things that I would like to add, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Amani. Very valid points, actually. All you mentioned, this is important. What I will encourage people, actually, when you do research on this topic, the internet is full of everything. If you put in YouTube or Google how to make, for example, Amani mentioned master slide. If you do that, you will find it's very easy, actually, 3, 4 steps on how to do it. In Facebook, if you start looking at PowerPoint, you will see a lot of Facebook tips about how to make sort of, I mentioned, for example, infographics, which is it have like 150,000 sort of templates of PowerPoint. I think you have to pay for that to access it. But again, that will make your presentation is different. For example, there is process how to do from A to B to C and in the presentation. There is so many, the details, and as I mentioned at the beginning, Amani, um, um, I'm just giving people the guide. So this is the entrance of effective presentation. The technical part, it can be covered. I think it's easy, better in a workshop face to face rather than online, because that will be useful to give people the technical skill of doing it. But from my experience, actually, now you know the frame. This is the big areas where it need to be covered. And then if you, for example, look at any, for example, I put transition or animation. If you put in Google, you put how I can use animation in PowerPoint, then you will, the answer, it will come to you in 2 or 3 minutes. It's much easier to self-educate yourself rather than to be spoon-fed. So this is my view about that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mani and Dr. Hamad. We have a question from Mariam, and then there are a few comments in the chat. Just one point to mention on the chat, I put the link to Sudaq YouTube channel where the presentation is currently recorded and will be uploaded to the channel later tonight or maximum tomorrow morning, inshallah. So, Mariam, please, you can unmute your mic and go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hamad, for the presentation. It was very insightful and comprehensive. My question would be, in the cases of at the end when we are allowing the audience to ask us questions, do you have any strategies to tackle like questions that we're unfamiliar with?
The concept, the framework will be the same. To be honest, it is very unlikely to be asked a question completely out of, I will give you a personal experience. I was giving an influenza, campaign, sort of to audience, to primary healthcare. And actually there was about 1,000, on the audience. Okay. I don't know them. I don't see your face. This is one of the weakness of the Microsoft team meeting. After I gave my presentation, one of the question, of the audience asked me, is influenza vaccine prevent COVID? Okay, so this is a question, to my knowledge, and I haven't come across this before. So you have to be very honest. Okay, you will say the two vaccines are different. The concept, but the prevention of for example, you can use a scientific way of thinking. Prevention of one respiratory sort of infection might prevent the other, but the one is unlikely to be directly sort of related. That was my answer, okay, in a scientific way, in a very honest manner. So you have to be very honest. When I went and searched after the meeting, and I saw that is the expert in the group, that I warn you about using the expert. And when I Googled it, I found a very big study done here in the COVID. Everybody done a study. Okay. So it's thousands of studies. You cannot follow all of them, even if you are an expert. So some people done a studies found that, the influenza vaccine protect against the focus. So that person most likely was a participant on that study. And I wouldn't say he want to, to make me sort of, humiliate me, but he was making, maybe he want me to comment on that area. If I very dismissive, if I was offensive, that person would have, sort of gained grounds. But to be scientific, to be honest of what you know, and then you can anticipate, because medicine is very interesting because it is all anticipating. Nothing comes out of nowhere. If you, by scientific thinking, if you say, from my experience, from my review, this is unlikely to do so because of this and that, and nobody will say you are wrong. For example, even in this study, it was an observational study, so it's not a causation study. And again, that is, even if he told you in our study we found this, then you have to contest it in a scientific manner. So every now and then you will have some difficult question, especially from experts. The way to answer it to, in a scientific manner, to be honest, and to try to avoid, giving sort of unleading answers. So unleading answer always will be counterproductive. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We have some complimentary comments from Dr. Inan, Dr. Abdurrahman, and Dr. Samah. Thanking you, Dr. Hamad, for the nice presentation. We have a question from Riham. She's asking, how do you think about using humor and funny things, for example, in presentations, especially or specifically with English people, where English is not our first language? Do you think it's useful to approach people, or it's just going to be humiliating?
My answer to this, it depends on the situation. Okay, so it's always the audience, the circumstances. The nice thing about humor, about interaction, icebreaker, as Amani mentioned, it will break the ice. It will make people at ease. Okay, for example, if you teaching juniors to try to be simple and to try to be, for example, if you give a very formal presentation with no jokes, with no interaction, that will not engage the audience. That will be against your objective. Okay, your objective is to engage the audience. So using jokes in moderation, and don't go out of your comfort zone. You've seen presenter whom they are funny people, okay, and they engage the patient, the audience by being funny, okay. So that person, this is their comfort zone. If you are a serious person, for example, and to try to be a jokey person, you will get out of your comfort zone, and it might not be well. But generally, use humor, using jokes are very good, okay, from my experience, because you can even throw them in the middle. You can say, from my experience, I had this situation or that situation. Because, and I, for example, I gave you Salvador Dali, sort of, in the middle of the presentation. That's a story. And that is how to make things interesting, and how to make the audience connect to, for example, I talked about milestones. That is new knowledge to some of you, okay? So by using different things during your presentation, you will make people connect to what you want to say, because at the end you want to deliver a message, okay? Using different things. So the answer to your question at the end, using sort of jokes, humor, icebreakers in moderation. You have to balance between the seriousness of your presentation, and don't go out of your content comfort zone. I'm saying that because at the end, people will interested in the content. So the most important thing is the content. How to deliver this content is maybe different from one person to another. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hamad. One last question, I think, from Arij. He's asking about, what's your advice for people with the bad habit of saying repetitive kind of words unconsciously and sometimes in Arabic during presentation? Like,
That is a very good question. Yeah. And it happens very frequently. That is, you need the feedback. Okay. So some people they might say, very, very frequent. They might not even be aware of it. Okay. They are not be, to be conscious, you need to ask your colleague, did I do anything wrong? Okay. They will tell you kept repeating, specific word. Okay. Then you will, next time you will be conscious about it. They will tell you while talking, you say lakin, for example. Okay. So even myself, I'm sure during this presentation, I might made mistakes and might ask some of the audience to give me feedback. So to avoid that is the feedback. Unfortunately, one of your colleague might be repeatedly making such a mistake, but you don't approach him. You'll find it very insensitive to try and go and talk to them about that. So to go over it, the presenter duty actually to ask colleagues, you listen to my presentation. Did I do anything wrong? How can I improve? Okay. So it's all happening in the subconscious, as you know, saying sort of repetitive words, using sort of Arabic word, for example, or other language words, or even people, for example, and I have few colleagues, for example, instead of words, you say words. They pronounce a specific, because this is, they grow up with this, okay? And unless you feed back to them, that is you making this. And as you already mentioned, English language is not our first language. You have to use feedback to avoid these common mistakes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, Renan.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam alaikum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid and Dr. Hamad, for this excellent presentation. I just had a small comment about this last point about saying the repeated unconscious words. We had an experiment in the past with some of the colleagues who used to do specific movements with his hands during the presentation. We experimented tackling this, and I guess it might be the same thing with the repeated words, through practicing using a mirror and recording the presentation video through the mobile. So he will have the laptop in front of the camera, in front of the mirror, watch himself at the same time, but recording the presentation, and then leaving this and repeat the practice in another day. And then he can review the video and see what he did and count how many times. And then with the repetition, there has been reduction of the number of the movements or words that has been unconsciously said. At the end, he's one of the most fluent people to be proud that you have colleagued them, because he overcome his own things by self-witnesses before the presentation day. But obviously the feedback from colleagues is extremely valuable also. Thank you.
Excellent point, yeah, Rinan. Yeah, yes, I completely agree. And this is self-recording. Okay, during our sort of training, actually, we've been recorded doing interviews. People, and I use a lot of it during my experience, taking videos. We've been recorded during doing presentation during our master. So again, to try to avoid the mistakes you already mentioned. And you can do it by your mobile. You can record yourself while doing a presentation by your mobile, or for especially big occasions. By recording, as you already mentioned, you will definitely notice your common mistakes, including the gesture, for example, by the hand gesture or the movement. And this is, by the way, the recording is a way of feedback. This is a documented feedback. So it's a very useful way of doing it. And as you mentioned, especially if you want to do it in a polite way, as you already did. So if you have a colleague, for example, doing things and you find it difficult to tell them, you can ask them, what about recording yourself while presenting? And unfortunately, people don't use the sort of available media very well. For example, all our computers are able to do the recording. So even if you have a presentation half an hour or longer, you can do the recording and then listen to them. For example, Microsoft Team meetings, for example, in our grand round, on our weekly meetings is recorded, okay? So as I myself go sometimes and listen to my recording, and I will do for this presentation to see what areas I did well and which area I need to improve myself. Because as I already mentioned, we are all aiming to continuously improve our presentation skill. Special thanks to Khalid, as you are coming to the end of your 2 years. Khalid is an exceptional academic secretary. I think that you have a very big shoes to fill, actually. So whoever comes after him, as you can see, he stretches above and he goes above and beyond, actually, in the sort of improving the academic activity of the Sudanese Medical Association in Qatar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hamad, for such a compliment. But it couldn't be done without the support of everyone around. And you've been with exceptional support, especially when it comes to the symposia and the webinars that you've been helping us through. As Dr. Hamad mentioned, we're just coming towards the end. One final question from Kamal. What tool can we use to create illustrations like complicated cell structure or pathogenesis of disease, etc.?
Okay, so the way for example, to have a structure, for example, what I used I try to use, I use picture, for example, from journals, okay, to amalgamate them together. For example, if I have the sort of cell wall mechanism of action, you can use insert. You will find, if you do your search, I use it very frequently. For example, if I look at the mechanism of action, I like pathogenesis. To deliver the message is much easier to put one picture to look at the mechanism of action, okay? To put a cell wall, and then you will look at where antibiotic will work in the cell wall and the things. And you can use insert by circling, by putting arrows, you can use that. So you need to have to take a technical sort of animation by one things. And as I mentioned in the sort of steps, in infographics, insert is a very powerful tool. It's like a keyboard. You can have different melodies, but it is time consuming. Okay, so it might take you 1 hour to produce one good slide. In animation mode, for example, one thing after another. When you go to presentation, you see some of the presenter give very good slides by sequences. That's why something like infographics saves the time for you, because it will give you the templates of slides to use it, like especially like a process. But anyhow, I think if there was a time, actually, I will open to you another presentation I have. You need to have a background, good slides. You can use it because one of the problem of importing something from somewhere else, it is the sort of the rights of publishing that. So if you bring it from a journal, then you will put the journal reference and you will be okay. You have a reference. You're not infringing any sort of legal rights. You put the journal. You put a good slides with the shapes, and then you add to it like circles, like arrows, and that will explain your things. And I like actually graphics very much because it will convey your message quickly.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hamad. So I think this puts us to the end of the session today. Just one announcement. We'll be having another session at the same time on next Saturday, inshallah. It will be about AI for scientific writing. Another topic that's been delivered during our last symposium, and it has a high demand as well to be presented. So you please follow our channels on the social media, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And this presentation, as I mentioned earlier, it will be uploaded on YouTube. So thank you very much, Dr. Hamad, for your time and for such a comprehensive presentation. And thank you, our audience, for your time and for the interaction, the comments and the questions. So it was a very fruitful discussion, a very comprehensive presentation, as I mentioned earlier. So thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you, Khalid and all. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening and to this late time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.